Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Everyday Educator podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Bailey, and I'm excited to spend some time with you today as we learn together, encourage one another, and ponder the delights and challenges that make homeschooling the adventure of a lifetime. Now, whether you are just considering this homeschooling possibility or deep into the daily delight of family learning, I believe you'll enjoy thinking along with us. But don't forget, although this online community is awesome, you'll find even closer support in a local CC community. So go to classicalconversations.com and find a community near you today. Well, listeners, I have a super treat for you today. Leigh Bortins, our dear founder and head lead learner, is here with me today. And I wanted to ask her some questions about going back to school. That's right. Leigh herself is going to tell us what it's like when you go back to school. All of you may feel like you are back at school when your children are studying, when you are reclaiming your education. And you may think, well, one day I'll get to the point where I know enough and I know it all and I'm not going back to school anymore. It's not the truth, is it, Leigh?
No, I mean, we're lifelong learners for a reason. And I just really appreciate you having me on your show, Lisa.
Yeah,
It's such just a privilege to be able to always see you and your face as we talk to one another through this thing called technology.
I
And
know.
we got a hold of you because I had such an amazing experience with my husband. We just recently went to Botswana on purpose to take a photography course.
That is so
And
cool.
and not really thinking about, oh, I'm going back to school. What would that be like in a classroom? I was just excited to go away on vacation with my husband and to learn something amazing and to be in a country I'd never been in before. And all those things did happen. And we had a very, very good time. But only a few minutes into the first class, I realized, oh, I really do learn things classically. And that doesn't
Ah,
mean my teacher teaches classically. So we
oh,
spent about
wow.
5 days butting heads, having a great
You and
time.
the teacher butting heads. Okay. Well, that could be really encouraging for moms who continually butt heads with their children. Okay. It can happen and learning can still commence.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And in fact, I think it's very personality driven.
Yeah.
So while I was sitting there, okay, so let's first think about this. I had an amazing teacher, an amazing situation classroom, the
Oh,
best of
yeah.
equipment. There was only 5 students to 2
Oh,
instructors.
my
So it's like,
word.
right, all the ideal conditions.
And
And
such
yet
beautiful things to photograph. Oh, my word.
it was so wonderful. So all of us are always trying to set up this perfect classroom. So I
Yes.
had it. And guess what? There was still conflict.
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay, stop right there for a minute.
that,
Stop right there. I want everybody just take a deep breath and feel your shoulders relax. Because look, here is Leigh, rocket scientist, founder of an education company in the perfect place. So the setting is perfect, the tools are perfect, the teacher has arrived, the student is engaged, and yet there's still problems. So, all right, take us, Leigh.
yeah. Well, and I'm going to kind of clinch it first. So at the end of the week, after the 5 of us were finished and having our last dinner with our teachers, the one lead said to all of us, "You are the first group of people I've ever had that didn't give up after the first day."
Yay! I'm proud of
And
you. I mean, I
yeah,
knew you'd never give up, but
never. But that made me go, oh my. And then, like, that's when it hit me. I have to podcast about this because
yes.
how many parents want to give up? How many kids want to give up? And then I thought, that is probably the nature of human beings is to give up. Because if you
When
have
it
that
gets
perfect,
hard.
yeah, in a perfect steer, I mean, and these people who go pay, thousands of dollars
Yes.
and know that it's a photography course. They know the camera will be heavy. They know you have to wait because animals don't, they don't ring a bell and they just
They
show
don't
up.
read the script. No, they did not read the script.
So you
So
know all that's going to happen.
what do you think? Because you said there were 5 students.
Mhm.
and not one of you gave up. I know you. So you were never going to give up. I mean, that was not going to happen. Um, what do you think possessed the rest of the people to persevere?
So I would say two things. One is their own personality and nature.
Okay.
And like when I was ready to give up because it was hard, and I'll explain what
Yes.
was hard later. And one of the other persons who was new to cameras was ready to give up at one point, but we didn't because as a class, as comrades, we encouraged one another, which is what you
Okay.
did in a CC community. So it
Yeah.
made me think, okay, so when these parents say, well, my child's just not going to do Latin or not going to do math, I'm like, all right, that's what you think. Did you sit in the classroom? Did you go to the
Yes.
director? Did you tell the
Yes.
other students, my child wants you to be their friend while you're doing Latin?
Yes.
Right? We need to encourage each other.
I love that. You said 2 things. I just
Mhm.
kinda wanna stop. Sorry to keep
Mhm.
interrupting you, but
No.
I want to be sure that people capitalize on what you're laying down. Okay, so it's the personality of the learner. So as parents, we need to know what is the personality of our learner, what is their bent, what frustrates them, what encourages them, and how can we come alongside of them and support them. But the second thing you said was community. That makes a huge difference. And at home, it starts with us as a family building a family rhythm of learning and learning in community for your child to have a partner who will learn it alongside them. I had one that really needed me to learn. So, well, they both did, but certain things I needed to learn alongside them. And then, like you said, the community of fellow learners is a great encouragement. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to, so from there, the other thing that, well, here's what made it so, another thing that I think made it so we kept going is all five of us had careers that required a lot of perseverance
Mm,
to get
mhm.
where we were. But that's because we're adults. You can't ever say that about a child. They haven't had time to have the experience to know how to persevere. So no wonder they throw a tantrum like a toddler or maybe cry or cross their arms and say, I don't want to do it. We never did that as adults. So that was a difference between adult learning and learning as a child. So the other thing is people always want to blame stuff on the teacher. So here's where I said the teacher and I butt heads. But because again, as an adult, I knew it was not never his responsibility to teach me. It was my responsibility to learn, which
Yes.
is an adult version of or an adult thought in education. Children won't say, "Oh, it's my job to do this." We're
Not at
supposed
the beginning, especially, unless you
to.
teach them.
Right. So that's we're always coaching them that, there's no such thing as an educator. People decide if they want to be educated or not and right and do it themselves. So that, I was reminded of that. Um, and then, the physical environment. So I don't have to practice holding my body still to do a math problem or to write an essay or to type on the laptop. I've been doing that a long time.
Right.
So that whole week, I had to practice holding the camera the right way. And it was a very
Ooh.
heavy camera. And I kept thinking, this is hard. And I'm not 6 years old trying to hold a
Yes.
pencil and a paper and manage a textbook and look up at the board and listen to my mom or the teacher saying.
Yes, and processing what you're hearing, but also what's coming through your brain so you can write it down. That's huge. So, what you're talking about is managing your body. So, as adults, we pretty much know how to sit fairly successfully a lot of the time. But as kids, they don't know. Being in motion is more natural to them than sitting. And so, you're talking about in the homeschool environment, training your mind and your body and a lot of times your emotions because of the perseverance. And as an adult learner, you pretty much only had to work on one of those, your
Yeah,
body.
yeah. Well, and the other thing that reminded me of the family situation too, was I was fortunate. I had a good bed to sleep in and I liked the food
Oh,
I was eating. But children might
awesome.
not get a good night's sleep, or they might not, how they go through those growth spurts where they
Oh
eat
my
too much
gosh.
and then they eat
Yes.
nothing at all. And we
Yes.
we sometimes will blame the textbook or how we're teaching when really they weren't going to learn anything from anybody that
Mhm.
day.
It was a body rhythm. It was just not synced up right. It was not meant to be. Yeah, and there are times as a parent, you just have to after you go through a couple of hours, you just have to look and say, "You know what? This is not our day to be successful at this. Let's go outside and see if we can be successful walking around the yard or digging in the garden or learning to ride your bike. Let's have a success." I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah. So the physical, so the environment, your physical capabilities, the people around you, like that doesn't change when you're learning. All those questions are effective. But the one thing that the instructor and I did that nobody else did is we kept arguing with each other, and he got really frustrated with me because he really was a very good teacher. And so
Yeah.
my husband, who's very, quiet and doesn't say much, and I didn't really know how I was going with him for the first couple days. So let me back up and explain. We did this for 5 days, and every morning and or evening we would take a safari ride either on a boat down the Chobe River or in the Chobe River National Park on a truck. So on the river, we had gimbals that held up the camera. So it was easier to keep the
Okay.
camera still. But in the truck, we didn't have that, and I'm not driving. So sometimes the driver would just go, and we're in the middle of the picture, right? And you're falling
Yeah,
back.
yes.
Stuff's
Oh
happening.
my word.
So, but
All
what we
kinds of
did
challenges.
so what we did between morning and afternoon safaris is we had classes where we could go to the instructor and he would explain how the camera worked better to us or show us how to
Mhm.
use Adobe Lightroom and talk to us about the kind of lighting that you do use in different shots, things like that.
Okay,
And
okay.
so that's where he began to get frustrated with me because when he's on the boat or in the truck, he can't see what we're doing. And
Right.
so he was working so hard. Mama's listening to this. He was working so hard to make sure our pictures were really good from the very beginning.
Oh my word.
I was working
Mm.
very hard to learn the camera and to teach
So you
myself.
were making a big mess of your pictures at first.
And on the second day, he came up to me and he goes, "If you don't start taking better photos and listening to me, I'm going to get fired."
That is
Well,
so
that
funny.
means
He thought you were sabotaging his goal of being a good teacher, but
so.
you were doing exactly what you needed to do to be a good student.
The other four people were way more like, compliant. And
Yeah.
here's the thing: that's how it came across. But first, let me back up. So that made me think of that poor teacher who knows her salary is based on all those kids doing
Those
what she wants them to
outcomes.
do,
Mhm.
and they're not going to. So anyway, so while I was arguing with him about, because he would tell us the exact way to take it, and I would say, "Well, I do a couple shots that way, but immediately turn all the knobs and do something else, right? Because I
And
want
he
to learn
wants you to say, "Stop it, stop it, stop it."
So on the third day, I realized when we really were starting to take pictures by that time, and I looked at my husband, who had said like nothing to the guy the whole time. His pictures were amazing, and I said,
Oh.
"How are you taking those pictures?" And he said, "I'm doing what you're doing. I'm just not telling him."
Oh, he's a quiet subversive. Gotcha.
Yeah. So by the end of the 5 days, and you're starting to see on Facebook some of the video or
Yes, they're
images I took,
amazing.
and it wasn't us individually. It truly was our camera, the environment, our instructor. He really was quite good at making sure we were situated right and looking at the right exposure and had the right shutter speeds and the lighting and all those things. So the for folks that maybe don't know a lot about photography, because I didn't, I had previously taken a course on composition, which you can do with any bad camera you want. But
Right.
this was on how to use the camera,
To
itself.
get the most out of what the camera could do for you.
Yeah.
I've taken a bajillion pictures and sometimes like of something seriously amazing. It is so beautiful. And I take the picture and it's like never like what I saw. So is this a camera that can more easily reproduce what you are really seeing? Is that the difference in quality of equipment?
No. So what a very good camera does is actually sees. Your
Ooh.
eyes are inherently damaged, and the lenses are more perfect. So the
Okay.
camera, when we got home and looked, the camera saw way more than I ever saw. And
Oh,
one of the things that
cool.
was kind of a hindrance, and this is on tools, so we can talk about this for a second,
Mhm.
is the lens was designed to get a really good shot of an animal's eyeball from a quarter mile away.
Oh
And we
my.
did. It was
Yes.
not a good camera for to take a broad view of 100
Right.
elephants around you
Okay.
within a few feet away.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so really you had to know your tool
Mhm.
really well in order to get the kind of picture that you wanted.
Yes. So we'd be sometimes taking pictures, and he could tell what we were doing in general by where we were pointing and how we were sitting
Right.
and things like that. And he would say, "You're never going to get that shot." And I would just look at him and say, "Yeah, watch me," because we're always on each other. But we enjoyed each other, and a whole lot. I don't want people to feel misrepresented here. He just thought that I really wasn't listening when I was listening, and that made me
Right.
think of all those so-called ADHD boys who don't seem to be listening, and then they're just fine when you give them
They're
their work to
listening.
do.
They're just doing more than you're asking them to do, or they're asking why, or they're pushing back, or they're trying to that's such wise counsel to realize that there there's a relationship there. There's a teacher and there's a mentor or there's a coach, um, a teacher, a mom, a dad, and then there's a student. And if they're coming at a task in a different way, then you have to allow there's not a perfect fit. You're going to have to allow for the give and take and the interplay of that relationship. I could tell, I taught Challenge B for like, it felt like 100 years. And I loved those eighth grade students. And I had some that believed everything I told them or, would be led by my questions to the right scenario. And then there were some whose second question always preempted my second question. They always wanted to know why or why not or what if and okay, but. And so those kids, we had a different dynamic.
Yeah. So you can even have that, between the adults in there. I told you Rob and I were different.
Sure.
So we had one of the people who was new to cameras. She wanted him to say, use this setting, use this light, sit in this position. I listened to that and then would decide whether that's what I wanted to do or not.
Yes.
Right. And then he was so good at tailoring. So we had two people on the boat who were already very good photographers. So they didn't
Okay.
need to have the basics that the other three of us did. But the first day or two, they listened because they said, we don't do this for a living and we forget.
Right. Yeah,
And
we
so
need a
we're so
brush up.
happy. Yeah,
Mhm.
so they were so happy for that. But once he knew each of our levels, he would change up the lesson for the five of us. So, for instance, they already knew the basics that the three of us were practicing that were new.
Right.
So he would help them change their lenses out and do it with different lenses. Well, we never
Ooh.
changed our lens. It was
Right.
enough
Right.
to use the camera. And
That's
so
cool.
I think about tailoring in CC. It has to be enough for some of your students to just write a basic essay.
Yeah.
But more of your
Yes.
students need to have all those descriptors and adjectives and the various dress ups, as well as the research. And then that's the other thing that was different. Those two would go home at night or during the day and research their lenses or research more of the dynamics of the camera. We would actually just look at our camera and
Right,
not
you
go
didn't
do
know
research.
enough. Yes, you didn't know enough to go deeper or
Mhm.
go searching for something else that you didn't understand yet. That's
Right.
really good, and it sounds like he was a very wise teacher in being able both to recognize which students needed what kind of prompt or what kind of encouragement, but also at being okay that everybody moved at their own pace.
Hmm.
I know
Yeah.
it sounds like he wanted all of you to get really good pictures, but he actually knew that what it would take for each of you to get a good picture was going to be different depending on where you started from.
Yep. And so that's going to be true with five students in a classroom. They're all on, say,
Yeah.
Challenge B, That's going to be the same with 5 children at home, and they're all different ages. It's like classical education forces you to practice the way humanity really is. It's not an
Mm.
artificial setting where the curriculum drives everything. Instead, the curriculum should just be your skeleton, and the student and teacher relationship is what drives everything. Because in classical conversations, our tutors and our parents are trying so hard to point their children to God. And yet the
Yes.
world wants to point them to completing their math book or getting a transcript. And we know we get I eventually could take a really good picture, but I am way better than I would have been if I only did what he said because I practiced in different ways. And so, like, when it's like that parent who says, well, why should I do tin whistle? We're doing the piano. They don't recognize that cross training, that breaking things, that failing. Those are all parts
Mhm.
of learning. And
Mhm.
that's what, an adult will accept while they're, trying to learn something versus like Andrew Pudo likes to say, our little guys want to just get the work done so they can go out and
Right, so they can go play.
report, right? And so we have to be wise enough to know that, yes, go ahead and get this done. This is one of those kind of things. Or
Right.
we're going to struggle, and it's going to be okay to struggle right now.
Yeah, I suspect that you know way more ways to take a good picture than you would have known if you had only done the one right way prescribed by him at every turn. Because you tried a bunch of things, and so now you know lots of different things to put together to get a different kind of picture. Whereas before, it was just one path. It's kind of like if you teach somebody to play the piano, just this one, we're not going to know scales, we're not going to know notes, we're not worrying about what the names are. We're just going to teach you how to play this one piece, and you get it beautifully, and you have a great artifact for the recital. But then next week, you have to start all over from the very beginning because you don't know any notes and you don't practice any scales. You have a leg up because now you know your camera and you know, yep, if I do this, it will not be good. It will not be pretty, or it won't be clear, or it won't be that range. That's really good. That's illuminating for us to see that it works in real life, not just in IEW or in Latin.
So the other thing I thought about is how my attitude worked for me with the tool I had.
Yeah,
I would have been an idiot if I'd had the same attitude if he was trying to teach me how to use a chainsaw,
because you know nothing about chainsaws.
and I don't want to cut my leg off.
Yes. Yeah, you would
No,
not have been eager to, adventure with that, would you?
right. And so that made me think once again that sometimes you look at your little guys and you say, no, stop, and you better stop the first time I say it because a
Right.
car's going to hit you.
Yeah.
Versus talking to your 12-year-old or 16-year-old and saying, hey, stop doing that, because we need to turn our attention elsewhere.
Mhm.
There's different tools, consequences, circumstances.
Mhm.
And so
And
that whole week I was thinking about all these things I've been doing for 20 plus years,
yes.
really 40 years with our children, and saying, how
Yes.
do they apply to me as an adult?
Wow, I think that's really good. I think it would help us all to just have a few quiet moments and think about, okay, so these tools that I'm using, I mean, the tools that we give our children are not inherently dangerous. You know, it's not dangerous to think about things or to practice things or to do an Annie chart. But think about, does this tool need to be used in a certain way, in a certain sequence, or at a certain time? Or can I, after we're all comfortable, can we play a little fast and loose with the order or with doing it to the nth degree? I think that's a good encouragement for us that, yeah, sometimes there are tools that you can play with. You don't have to do it exactly like the guide prescribed. And you may learn something different along the way. I like that.
That's good.
I like
So
that.
those are the main things I wanted to share with people. That as much as I loved being there with my husband, and I love Botswana and the Chobe River, and I love all my photos, I was still loving being a lead learner and thinking through how does that affect things. Because, I got those grandbabies and I don't do
Yeah.
too much math or science with them or, cause coursework, but they're the ones I'm taking bike riding and kayaking and canoeing, and we build forts. And, I'm that active grandma. And it helped me think about, all right, so like last week we took Joe and I taught him how to ride a bike.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah. And you said that's, one of those things you mentioned earlier we
Yeah.
need to do. And so while I was working with him riding the bike, I thought so differently than when I taught my own children. I said to
Oh
him
my
first, right,
word.
let's look at your bike. It's a little bit, maybe 2 inches too tall for you to be safe while you're riding. So
Hmm.
our first lesson was learning how to fall.
Oh
And he
wow,
loved it
Lee.
when he didn't fall when I let go, right? So, and we weren't going anywhere. We were just
Right.
upright and falling. So then whenever he started actually moving and started to fall, he knew how to catch himself. I
Oh,
don't think I
so
did that with
smart.
any of my children.
I'm sure
So,
I didn't do that. Yeah. Things we learn on our children. We practice on these poor children so that we can be good when we're grandparents. I know. I'm a way more, I think, patient, chase the moment with my grandchildren than I was with my children. There was always a purpose. And, I always had in my mind what I wanted them to attain. And I've had to train some of that out of myself. And I got better and better as they got older and older. But I think, man, I could do a darn good job of homeschooling my grandchildren, because now I am less about the outcome than I am about the process and the relationship.
yeah.
Um,
You know what? Maybe instead of outcome, we should say income and really mean it. What are we
hmm.
putting in? Not income money, but
Yes.
income love and
And
attention and
yes,
energy.
yes, and willingness to suspend our disbelief and to see it from the child's side. Sometimes my grandson will ask me a question, and I now know that if I don't understand, I need to not expect him to use my words, but I need to say to him, "Help me see." And I do. I will say to him, "Help me see it a different way. Um,
Right.
use some different words, or show me with your hands, or show me with your body, because I don't understand what you know. So help me get it." And
Mhm.
that's a relationship builder.
Yeah. And that got back to my trip in Botswana. Our guide, as good as he was, he's only 40. And I was thinking about that. What kind of a teacher are you going to be when you're 60?
Oh my goodness.
After
Well,
20
gosh,
years.
Lee, think what kind of a teacher he is after a week with you. Okay. He probably is looking for people who want to break the rules, or who want to ask questions, or experiment before. Um, I mean, you went into it knowing what kind of learner you are, right? So
Yes.
you knew that probably you were not going to just follow the prompts, because you needed to understand, but what else, or what if. And so I think, um, when we think about our homeschool, I think it's wise for us as parents to think about our own personalities, our own learning personalities, our own proclivities. I think if I had known that I should do that before I started teaching my children, they would have had fewer hiccups in the subjects that made my heart beat a little faster. There were things about my learning personality that I thought, okay, I didn't get that right. I'm going to make sure that you get it right. But what I did at the beginning was just compound my mistakes or my bad learning habits. And so I think it would be really wise for us all just to say, okay, how do I react when I'm learning something new? What is my knee jerk reaction to not getting something right, and try to get over ourselves?
So another connection too was I started off by saying the guide said we were the only group who had all stuck with it. And I
Yeah.
can imagine how many people went home and said, "Oh, he's such a horrible guide." Right. And
Oh,
how many times we do that? We blame it on the book or our parents' relationship or the teacher that we have.
mhm.
And nobody on our boat was going to do that. That just wasn't like thinking people don't really do that. And
That's so good.
yeah, because we could have said, well, what's wrong with you that they don't want to finish? And not a one
Yes.
of us thought that. We were like, well, you're a really good teacher. What was the problem?
Well,
So,
I like it that you did remind us at the outset that you guys were all adult learners, and
mhm.
so and you had, gone out of your way and given up a lot of resources, whether that's money or time or distance, to take that class. But you all also took responsibility for your own learning. You didn't think it was the teacher's responsibility or the coach's responsibility. Um, I have told a few people this story before. That was a lesson that, I learned, uh, as it came out of my mouth to my child. I learned and had to repent. We were sitting at a table doing chemistry together, and, it was in one of the advanced lessons. I don't know, we it was it involved stoichiometry, but also other higher math, and I remember thinking, 30 years ago, I did not like to do this, and I did not know what I was doing, and I don't know now. And I had other things on my agenda for the day, and she was getting frustrated, and I got frustrated. And I said to her, I said to her, you went to community. I did not go to community. What did Miss Carey show you about these kinds of problems? What did she? It's Miss Carey's job to introduce this to you. And then it's one of those moments where there's silence and you hear it echo, her responsibility, her responsibility, her responsibility. And I just thought, oh no. And I said, and I apologized. I said, Sarah, I have to apologize to you. And her head jerked. And I said, I need you to hear me. It is never gonna be Miss Carey's responsibility to teach you chemistry. It is first Mama's responsibility to shepherd you as we learn chemistry together. But ultimately, you're 16. It's your job to learn this. And I said, so we're having trouble. I said, so it's the math. I know it's the math. I can't remember how to do it. Let's go ask Daddy, Mr. Math Major, and he can teach me and I'll teach you and we'll move on. And I apologized and cried and she cried and we did the math and we got it. Woo! I thought that was the end of the lesson. Fast forward to college and she came home or called me one day and said, I don't know what's going on. This is a photography class, and my advisor let me take this level, and there was a prerequisite for this class that I didn't have, and my advisor didn't say I had to have it, and now I'm in over my head. And I said, please, tomorrow is the drop ad date. You need to get out of that class. What in the world? I don't know. You just need to go handle it. And we hung up, and I thought she'd handled it. So several weeks later, I said, "So what did you pick up instead?" She said, "Oh, I kept photography." And I was so annoyed. And I said, "Honey, why did you do that? You knew there was all this stuff you didn't know." And she said, right. I knew what it was that I didn't know. I knew I was missing the basics, the grammar. She said, and I said, so did you just get help from the teacher? She said, no, I knew what I was missing. I went online and found that and cleared up the gaps. She said, Mama, it's my responsibility to learn what I need to learn.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, so I thought I was supposed to be teaching her chemistry. What I was supposed to be teaching her was how to be a lifelong learner and be
Yeah.
responsible for her own learning. And so that was that. And that was, Lee, that was 12 years ago that I first had that experience. And, probably a good 10 years ago when she went to college and had that. But it still resonates with me. And I think it resonates with all of us who need to be responsible for our own learning. Don't be afraid to learn something new, and don't be afraid to be unconventional in how you learn it.
Yeah. Well, and that story just highlights how, because I have similar stories I could share, but how oftentimes we're the millstone that handicaps our children.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. Um, how do we get out of our own way? How do we get out of our children's way, Lee?
Yeah. I don't think you can know. I mean, you've heard me say this before, but every day is a new day. You've never
Mhm.
had it before. You've never had children that age before in that circumstance before. The Lord's made it so that there's no way for us to know what to do. And that's
Yeah.
a wonderful thing because you get to rely on the Holy
I was
Spirit
gonna
instead.
say. So, we just need to trust God. We need to trust
Mhm.
God and rely on Him and let the chips fall as they may and
I,
trust His goodness.
I think why that falls on deaf ears or seems trite to people, Lisa, is because they actually think God's some ethereal thing. They don't know that He's
He's a
a
real
person
person.
that we talk to every day and He actually
Yeah.
answers us.
Yes. Yes. In your despair, when you cry out and say, "God, I don't know what to do. You're gonna have to show me." He will, and He does. And that, you know what, is actually the most encouraging thing. That is the most encouraging thing. All right, what was the most exciting part of your trip? Is it the pictures that you brought home, or something you learned about yourself, or the community you built?
So maybe this won't be exciting, but it's definitive.
Yeah.
I left knowing I was probably never going to buy a camera. So as much as I loved it, I will pay and go on another photo safari, but it was so distracting compared to just being, having that always in
Oh,
your hand. And so
yes.
I may go ahead and buy a small, better travel camera, but you won't be seeing it me with around my neck because to do it well, it's like playing the piano. I would have to play the piano and not be cooking. So to take
Right.
pictures well, you have to take the pictures, not be a tourist. So that
Mm.
was interesting for me to find out about myself. Exciting wise, of course, was the all the animals. I'll share a few stories because I won't get to anywhere else.
Yes.
And you guys can edit
Yes.
it or do what you want with it. But we were charged in our Jeep by an elephant in Musk, which was so scary.
Oh
But
my
you can know all five of us were flashing that camera as fast as we could because if we were going to die,
goodness.
we were going to get pictures of it. And then one of the most delightful stories was as a baby elephant was just dead tired asleep in the road. And we got up to it, and the guide kind of gently honked the horn and woke that elephant up. He was so mad. He started screaming and screaming. Well, all his friends, all these 3 foot tall elephants, ran out of the bushes and were all yelling and screaming at us. So the elephants were just a hoot. And then we got to watch a couple of mamas teach their four cubs how to kill a water monitor, and then to see how
Oh.
the cubs deferred to the older brother and how he wouldn't
Oh.
share. And so, we saw just a whole lot of mammal dynamics that obviously
Mhm.
you're not going to see in the middle of the United States.
No.
So that was very fun. And then once again, the camera, I'll never have a good picture of the giraffes, but we at one point were surrounded by, I counted 27 giraffes, all within touching distance of our vehicle,
Whoa, that is
and
so cool.
hundreds of elephants at one time, literally 100 impalas and turn the corner, there's another 100, turn the corner, there's another 100. So just the sheer quantity of them. And so the things you get to see them do because there's so many of them.
Mhm.
It was delightful, but no more delightful than when the next weekend I took the grandbabies camping and
Yeah.
Jonah ran over a snake with his bicycle. And, the kids got to swim in the river with snakes. And it was just a big snake weekend. And we got to see a falcon eat a quail. And, the Lord's got his creation just
Yes.
all around us. You don't have to go anywhere to take
Yeah.
good pictures, to learn,
Yeah.
to share it with somebody else.
There's wonder all around. I love that.
Mhm.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love that you shared your experience with us, and I love that there were so many applications to where we all are on our learning journey, no matter where that is. I like it that you showed us we can go back to school, we can be a student, and that actually it's probably good from time to time for us as lead learners to still be learning, to still be the student, so we don't forget that these habits of learning are real and they're helpful. Um, and they are applicable not just to whatever our children are learning, but what we are learning throughout life. in the life of the Lord. I love that. Um, I wanted to talk about the math map for a minute, Lee. We want there to be, we want our listeners today to keep thinking about the math map. And we know that our families who have students going into Challenge B will be using the math map in community this fall. So they'll be doing the monomials. Talk a little bit about monomials and what families can expect.
Yeah. Well, so just like we talked about with the photography course or the stories that we've been sharing, our whole goal is to help everyone to see the unseen. And as frustrating as that camera could be sometimes for me, well, that's how frustrating the monomials will be for your child. And it's a good thing when that happens because that frustration, that practice, that repeatedness will make it so that then the next day they try that same kind of problem and go, "Ah, what was the problem? I'm fine. I can do
Yes.
it." Right. And be a confidence builder. So it is math. Math never goes, the math map's not going to make it. So you don't have to calculate or do problems. And so you have to have a
Right.
willing heart in that. And so I just want to remind people always of that common sense and perseverance are your best friends, as well as the Holy Spirit when you're learning anything,
Hmm.
including if you're a Challenge B student. But what I'm really excited about with the monomials is kind of that it has a different name like that it's monomials. That even if the students learn what a monomial is and nothing else, they're going to know more about math than a child who says, well, I had algebra 1 and algebra 2. I mean, just the
Hmm.
language itself is going to help them if they pursue higher math as adults. So the perseverance with the language and the more difficult algorithms, because they are beginning, there weren't a lot in the complex level, um, but those are just processes. So it's kind of like,
Right.
how do you hold a chainsaw or hold a camera? Well, how do you
Yep.
hold that problem in your head? And what steps do you have to do that, like your daughter, you got to go look up.
Right.
So learning the resources and learning the language. So learning the resources of math, the language of math is still going to be the goal.
Yep.
Um, Calculating will come, but it's hard to ask you to do a lot of calculations outside of natural numbers if you don't know the processes in the language. And so
That's
to
exactly right.
work on
Yep.
that.
Yep. So monomials really is going to help those students practice the introductory algebraic computations, but they're mostly going to use the classical skills so that they learn to talk about math. They learn to speak the language of math. And the cool thing about monomials is that it allows your Challenge B and older students to do math at the family table with your younger students who are practicing with digits or fractions. And you can, as a parent, teach all of your children together. It's like a unified math language for home and community. So, you guys check out Monomials. You can look on the bookstore now and find out about that newest level that's rolling out. Awesome. Leigh, thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait to see more of your pictures on Facebook, but I'm going to look at them in a different way now when I think about you going back to school to learn how to take good pictures. Thanks for sharing with us.
You're welcome. It was wonderfully fun, Lisa.
All right. Bye bye.